I didn't realize until I had a baby that it would be a whole new me as well. And that identity shift is what is really important to support. That's where I came up with the idea of newborn mothers. When a baby is born, so is a mother. You're always going to be a mother, and it changes who you are and your world perspective for the rest of your life.
Hi, everyone, and welcome again to the Business Journal, of course, powered by Next Level Assist, where business professionals share real stories, their honest lessons, and practical insights that you can definitely apply to your own business and your own career. Now, I'm your host, Mia Juan, and today's guest for this episode is Julia Jones. She is the founder of Newborn Mothers, a global postpartum education organization. She's a best-selling author, a podcast host, and an advocate for redefining postpartum care through neuroscience, tradition, and emotional support. Julia has trained thousands of professionals across more than 60 countries and is known for her philosophy, which is your baby is born and so are you. And today we are going to talk about her business journey, how she built an international education company, and the lessons that she learned running a heart-centered digital business. So please welcome in today's podcast, Julia Jones. Julia, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's a busy time, but all good things.
All good things. Nice to meet you finally in person. We usually just talk through email. So I'm very, very, very excited that you are here on our podcast. So let's start off by, quickly introducing yourself. The question would be like before Newborn Mothers became a global community, where did your personal journey start in postpartum care?
Yeah, so I started out really interested in human rights and social justice, and I always had this passion that that's what I would like to do. I thought maybe I would work for United Nations or something like that when I was young. That was the sort of person that I was, but I was also always very entrepreneurial. I was always the kid having bake sales and, market stalls and doing babysitting jobs and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when I finished my university degree, I was traveling in Asia, and the thing that really struck me was how differently families were cared for and treated, and especially after birth, that mums were really respected and revered, and I just thought that was a really beautiful thing. And I realized that in human rights kind of field, that was something that was really missing, was women's rights, but specifically mothers' rights. It's like we're sort of trying to make some inroads with women in workplaces and in education, and we're trying to close that pay gap and that sort of thing. But I still feel like human rights for women fall off a cliff when they become a mother, and there's not a lot of support for their health, for their well-being, for their careers, for their ability to be the parent that they want to be. So that was sort of what started me into postpartum, and then I learned about postpartum care around the world, and then I sort of looked at it from more of a scientific and evidence-based perspective, and started working as a postpartum doula.
Perfect. In the Philippines mainly, I'm not. Of course, we do have a lot of audience from different parts of the world, but postpartum doula itself is not a common term that we know about. I learned it from my client, working with clients in the US. Can you just briefly explain what is postpartum and what is postpartum doula? Because as a mom here in the Philippines, I'm just like, okay, I give birth and then I'm going to raise that child and that's it. So what does postpartum and doula mean?
Yeah, postpartum simply means after birth. It's it's people think sometimes that postpartum means depression, and some people use it to say I had postpartum, meaning I had depression. It's not what it means. It just means after birth, but it shows you how poorly we care for mothers, that we think that postpartum is synonymous with depression, that we think that that's what it means. I always say postpartum is forever, that you have a baby and people say, how long is that? And the physical transition can be sort of 6 to 8 weeks. The emotional transition is a lifetime. You're always going to be a mother, and it changes who you are and your world perspective for the rest of your life. And then doula is a word that was coined by an anthropologist, Dana Raphael, in America, I think in around the 70s. And she really struggled with breastfeeding. And she called herself a reflexive anthropologist, meaning she had a challenge in her own personal life, and she looked around in culture and thought, why is this happening? And what she discovered was that in almost 200 other cultures around the world, there was a specially named caregiver who would come to look after mums after their babies were born. And she was specifically at that time looking at breastfeeding support. Since then, the word doula has come to mean birth support during labour and delivery, and that's what most people now think that it means. But originally, she intended for that word to mean breastfeeding support. And although it's not common in the Philippines, it's very common in some of your neighbouring countries. So in like Malaysia, it's very common to have a confinement lady to come and care for you after a baby's born. But I think the Philippines, similar to Australia, has been colonised, and we've lost a lot of our traditions, and particularly our oral the oral traditions that would have been passed on from grandmother to mother to daughter and so on through the generations. And so, originally the Philippines would have definitely had postpartum care, but it's been lost along the way.
I also found out about doula through my client when I was working as an executive virtual assistant for a US-based client. She was pregnant, and then she told me, "Can you look for a doula for me?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And then that's when I found out that they're totally different from your OBGYN or the doctor who's going to help you give birth or who will birth your child. But the doula is really somebody who's going to think about what is best for you, because they will talk to you while you're pregnant. They will understand what type of birth you want to have, your experience, how you want your birth experience to go, and they will actually like help talk to your OBGYN, talk to the person who's going to birth your child and all of those things. So it's very different because we don't have here in the Philippines, or if we do, maybe just for the few people, the really rich ones who like very westernized. So it's nice to know that you are someone who's really introducing it to the world, because it's something that we women really would need help on. Like, I didn't have my doula when I was pregnant at 18, so I didn't have any clue. I think my mom was my doula in that way. But yeah, thank you so much for explaining that.
The one thing is, it is important to know, as you mentioned, it's not a medical role. So it's not the same as having a midwife. It's not the same as having an obstetrician. It's someone who's there as a companion for emotional support, to help you with practical things like, how do you care for a baby? Who do you ask your questions about breastfeeding? When do you need to go and see a doctor and what's normal? And how do you cope without sleep? And how do you make new friends? And, all of those things that come up as part of that transition to motherhood. And, from one of my Filipino VAs over the years, I've learned a little bit about some postpartum Filipino culture, and there is a lot of, I'm not going to be able to say any of these words, but you have some postpartum food, including like chicken and rice porridge, and yes, and a stew with like pork and vegetables in it, a mung bean stew. So there's like little hints and clues of perhaps what, the way that mothers used to be cared for. Yeah. And I think particularly the leafy greens, there was a lot of leafy greens made into stews.
Malunggay. Yes. That's what helps with breastfeeding to produce more milk. Yeah.
So we can often find these little clues, even if we've lost a lot of knowledge in a lot of traditions. There's still little crumbs we can find and start to build that care tradition again.
Yeah, it's passed on through moms, through history. So yeah, but of course, it's still different to have that someone, like you mentioned, a doula that would, it's fact-based, science-based assistance, and not just like traditional mom to daughter, how do you call it, yeah, traditions, like activities that is being done through different generations. So it's nice to have someone who can really be excuse me, who can really assist you fact based and science based.
Yes, because
Now my
one of the
yeah.
problems is we've lost a lot of knowledge. So when we have this whole history now of many generations not breastfeeding and not
Yeah.
knowing, what normal baby sleep is like, and not having support
Mhm.
from their community, then sometimes the information that people in your community pass along to you isn't actually accurate and isn't going to give you the best chance of being the mum that you want to be. So yeah, it's important that we add that knowledge back in as well.
That's right. And this brings me to your philosophy. This is someone that I was doing research about you, someone that really struck something that really struck me. You famously said that when a baby is born, so is a mother. So can you tell us about how this idea like shaped your entire business, how you came about this idea and this philosophy?
Yeah, when I first became a postpartum doula, I hadn't had my own babies yet. And I
Mhm.
still saw the role as largely practical help. So I thought that as a postpartum doula, I might cook a meal for a mum, maybe like
Mhm.
teach her how to swaddle the baby. And at the time, I did massage and some belly binding and just really practical physical recovery. That was all really great. But what I learned when I had my own baby was I hadn't realized, and I hadn't been taught in any of my training at that time, the profound, um, literally personality change that happens when we
Mhm.
become mother. Everything shifts. I was so shocked that even like I felt like the music that I like changed, and the friends I wanted to hang out with changed, and my ambitions in life changed. My whole perspective, my values, what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy, and what was important to
Yeah.
me was so different. I've thought that when I had a baby, it would be me plus a baby. I didn't
Mhm.
realize until I had a baby that it would be a whole new me as well. And that identity shift is what is really important to support as well through rites of passage and even just normalizing it, even just telling everyone your brain is changing. It's really normal that you're feeling different. You might feel like crying all the time. You might be forgetful. Your brain's going through this big transition.
Yeah.
And so that's where I came up with the idea newborn mothers. When a baby is born, so is a mother, because I felt like we weren't really acknowledging that. We were still treating this woman like she was the same person, like she
Mhm.
just bought a handbag, but it's like a baby changes who you are. And
Yeah.
I felt like newborn mothers was a phrase that helped people to understand that. I still get people telling me, you can't be a newborn mother. Don't you mean newborn babies? And I'm like, no, that's exactly the point. You can be a newborn mother.
That's so true because I gave birth at the age of 19. I was still in college. So when you talk about those changes, even with my friends, I wasn't able to retain the same friends throughout the years after giving birth because they were not going through the same experiences as I have that I currently have. So they're still going through college, they're still going out at night, having drinks with friends, while I'm here at home. I'm caring for my baby, and I was just still a teenager myself. So it's so true that things change, even the way I look at life. The fear that I have every day, like if something happens to me, what's going to happen to my child? It really is different. So they always say here that when you become a mom, you like grow up overnight. So I do, yes, believe that as a mom, when you, especially if it's the first time, it also feels like you have new experiences. It rewires your brain. I do became more forgetful after that. So you're right. We do feel like newborns ourselves. So I really love that you were able to what's this, explain in just a few words how a new mom feels when they just gave birth. So thank you so much for that. You've now I want to go back to you're not just helping moms, but you're also training others how to help new mothers. So we know that you've trained postpartum professionals in more than 60 countries all over the world, of course. What were the early challenges of you scaling to such a heart-centered business?
Yeah, I think I started to that transition when I had my second baby, and I just didn't. I was actually went and visited a client, and on my way home, my car got a flat tire, and my baby needed breastfeeding, and I was like, "Oh, this is crazy! I can't." I don't have the capacity right now in my life to be looking after other mums when I'm still a mum and I still need looking after myself. And so I was also at the time getting asked from other people, how do I do that work? Where do I learn to do what you do? And I had studied over the telephone. It was a long time ago now. It was online study, but it was on a teleconferencing call before Zoom. And there was not really anywhere to learn. So when people were booking me as their postpartum doula, and then other people were saying, where do I get a doula if you're booked, or how do I become a doula myself? And in the end, I was like, well, it's going to have to be me. Like, when you look around, like, no one's doing this. Someone needs to do this. So I started teaching. And at first I was just teaching in my mum's kitchen. I was renting a very small house at that time, so I would go to my mum's house, which was nicer than mine, and have a few people in her kitchen, make some food, and teach them a few of the things that I'd learned. And then from there, we moved online. And I've always really loved the potential of the internet to share knowledge and without gatekeepers. So, the idea that we could possibly actually begin to share this wisdom from woman to woman again that's been taken away from us, and be able to do that at a faster rate, at a bigger scale, that was really exciting to me. So when I developed the course online, I always had the intention that there's no reason why everyone in the world can't buy this, because the transition to becoming a mother is largely biological. So the things that are happening in our bodies, even though there might be cultural differences, they still require the same sort of care and support. So from the very beginning, I was teaching people, with this perspective that postpartum is a universal human experience, and regardless from what country or culture you're from, there are still some really simple foundational principles that everyone should know. From there we had, I can't remember how many people had my first online course. I think I only had 4 people when I did it at my mum's house, and then we did it online a few years later, and it took many years. I think the biggest thing is, actually, when I first went online, I thought I was going to be working directly with mums, and then that changed to teaching. But you always just try a lot of things. Anyone who's an entrepreneur knows you tried 20 things and no one sees the 19 that didn't work. So just think that you got it right the first time. But I tried a lot of different ways of doing this, and that was the one that worked. I ended up teaching people online to be professionals. Yeah.
To be professionals. So just so everybody in the audience understands, so aside of you being a doula yourself, is that right? You're a doula, you're helping new moms or moms throughout their journey. Aside from you doing that, but your business model also is helping others how to become just like you, like a doula helping other moms within their country, within their city. Is that correct?
Yes, I actually haven't had a client as a postpartum doula since my third baby was born, probably about 8 years ago. So there was a transition where after a few years of trying to do both and having my third baby, I realized I just didn't actually have time for both. So now for the past 8 years, I have only been training professionals and not working with families myself, because I've got 3 kids, so you just can't do everything.
As much as we want to be a super mom, we can't, especially when we have 3 kids. But it's great that you didn't stop from just, since you know that you need time with your family, you don't have enough time to be part of a family or part of a woman's journey through pregnancy and through birth. You still made sure that your advocacy and your mission is still there by helping others to become just like you, to become you and become a doula themselves. That's right.
Yes, and I also felt like that's probably where I could have the biggest impact, because if we go right back to the beginning, my goal was always human rights and social justice, and making a positive difference in the world. And so when I'm sitting down and thinking, well, I only have so many hours in the week, what's going to make the biggest difference? It's training other people, because then, if I work with one family, that's lovely. But if I train one
Mhm.
doula, then she might work with 100 families. And then I can train another doula as
That's right.
well. So that was a really exciting idea to me.
That's all right. Bigger impact is what's important, right? It's always the impact that you put into the universe. Now, we're talking already, or we're already transitioning into the business side of things, so the entrepreneurship. Now, many people definitely won't associate postpartum care with entrepreneurship. Now, how did you learn the business side of things when it comes to postpartum care and teaching this online?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think one of the differences is I did invest in that education. I always encourage my students to do this too. You pay to
Mhm.
learn postpartum care. It's also a really good idea to pay to learn business skills as
Mhm.
well. And I think it's a big mistake a lot of heart-centered business owners make, is thinking, oh, well, if I'm just really caring and kind, the universe will provide for me. But you do need to have a good idea of, money and legal stuff and
Yeah.
marketing plans and boundaries. Boundaries are probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, the first thing I did was, after I had qualified as a postpartum doula, I did a
Mhm.
few different postpartum trainings. And then after that, when I started working, the first thing I did was to get a business coach. So I think right from the beginning, I had that really strong feeling. That I think the other thing was, at the time my husband was setting up a charity, and he wasn't actually earning a lot of money either, and we wanted to start a family, and I thought, well, I can't do this for free. Like, if I
Yeah.
want to do this work, I have to figure out how to get paid for it. It's not an option for it to be a hobby for me. And so right from the beginning, there was definitely that feeling of like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. So how are we going to make this sustainable?
That's all right. As much as we want, because I also am an online coach, or I also teach others how to become a virtual assistant. So, as much as you want this to be like helping others for free, you need to also think about how do you make this sustainable for the long run, so that you can continuously teach others and provide impact and life changing content or information to your audience and to your to the people that you want to teach. Now, aside from the mission and the goal that you have of having to teach these uh, aspiring professionals to provide impact to other moms out there, what are the structures and systems that actually help you turn this passion that you have into a thriving online business?
That's such a good question, because what I found is it's actually a lot of the things that we teach new mums, the things that also help me as a business owner as well. So, things like asking for help and building a village of support, having boundaries, being able to say no to things, and treating my time as though it's precious. I know a lot of
Yeah.
women struggle with valuing their own time,
Mhm.
but going like, no, I don't have an hour for that. It's not high enough in my priorities. So yeah, I think a lot of those things we teach to new mums actually really support me as a business owner as well.
That's so nice. You've already mentioned about your time. So I just want to talk about like running your business that's actually rooted in empathy and emotionally heavy, because the changes of a mom, the changes of the personality, it's sometimes they're going through a really hard pregnancy. And especially the people that you teach, it's very hard to be emotionally invested in a client, in a customer. So how do you protect your energy if your community and the people that you try to reach, the people that you try to help, and the type of industry that you are in is heavily too emotional, and you need too much empathy to make this actually work. How do you protect your energy?
Yeah, I always tell people they have to count every hour that they're working, not just the hours that they're with a client, because sometimes you can spend 2 or 3 hours with a new mum, but then you go home and you actually need a whole hour more to decompress, to wind down, maybe to debrief with another doula or talk to a social worker or psychologist. You know, there's all these other things. Sometimes people find they might need a massage or something like that to sort of bring them back into their own body. These are all things we need to consider when we're pricing our work. Our work isn't only the hours that we're, you know, standing face to face with a client, it's all the other hours too. And that impacts how many hours we can work in a week. And I think that's probably a big problem, is when people think, oh, I've got 40 hours in a week, that means I could work with 10 clients, but they're not giving themselves that time to decompress, to reset in between, but also not giving themselves that time to run the business. You still need to send invoices, update the website, you know, do your marketing plan. And so I always say you only get paid for half the hours that you're working. And so you need to charge twice as much for those hours to cover all the other hours that you're not getting paid for.
Yeah. So it's true, right? Like, you have to incorporate your rest and your recharge during your work, through your work hours, right? It cannot be after your 8 to 5, that's when you just rest. In some way, especially in an industry like yours, it's very important to also include a time to rest and have those breaks during your actual 40-hour work week. Because if not, it's going to lead you to burnout, especially in industries like this. It's also very important, like you mentioned, reaching out to a psychiatrist, to a therapist, talk to someone. It's also very important, I believe, in any type of industry and any type of work, that you have a community. You have a community that will support you, that will understand what type of work that you do and what you're going through on a daily basis. Now, you've been working with a lot of mothers. What have mothers like me, women, have taught you about leadership, resilience, and of course, community?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is really understanding those brain changes, because a lot of the time when we have a baby, we think, oh, I'm really forgetful now, I'm really stupid, you know, I'm so emotional about everything. And we think of it as a really bad thing. We don't really think of it as a positive thing, but they're actually really good benefits of these brain changes as well for mothers. For example, we become more ambitious. We become better at assessing risks and making decisions based on those risks. We become more empathetic. So some people are like, oh, you're so emotional, as though that's a bad thing. But actually, we're better at reading body language and nonverbal cues. We're better at communicating and understanding people and listening more deeply. So there's a lot of skills that come along with motherhood that benefit us in the workplace. As well. So I always try to really embrace that kind of like mother archetype in my work as well, which I think also does prevent burnout or minimize the risk of burnout, because we're also working with our strengths as women and mothers, rather than trying to fit this work into the masculine world. So yeah, I mean, mothers are my biggest inspiration for sure.
That's so nice. You know, my mom is my biggest inspiration also, and of course, kudos to a lot to all of the mothers out there. Whether you are a mom to a child or a fur mom, we have a lot of fur moms out there also. So I just want to say kudos to all of the moms, whatever type of mom you are. But I also want to touch base. Aside from this actual business, you are also an author and a podcast host. So can you talk about the reason behind what drove you to writing your book, and talk a little bit more about your book as well?
Yeah, I've always been a writer. I love writing. And so it was just quite a natural thing for me to do, is actually just pull together all the blog posts I'd written over 10 years and sort of start shaping them into a book. I wanted it to be really short and accessible to mums. So it's only about 200 pages long, I think. And I know if I went through a traditional publisher, they would want me to make it longer. But I was really conscious that I've read books like that as a mother where I'm like, I can tell this is a filler chapter because the publisher said they had to make it a certain length, you know. So I'm like, well, if you can get it down to like the TED Talk version, that's what you want to give a sleepy mum. So yeah, I just wanted to be able to really get sort of the most key learnings into the hands of as many mothers as I possibly could. And as a writer, that was the obvious way to do it. It's also part of my marketing plan, really. It's a little bit, you don't make a lot of money being an author, but it does just mean that it's like a little business card for my book, you know, because people gift it to a new mum and then she shares it with a friend, or people tell someone, I was reading this book and I learned this thing. I really like in-depth storytelling for marketing. I really don't like social media. So for me, having something like that where you can really go deeply into a topic and really connect with someone, that's the same as podcasting. You can meet people, connect with them, share stories, and bring in different opinions and versions, and you know, and you can learn so much more in those kinds of content than you can on like a 1 minute reel on Instagram or something like that. So that's where I put all my marketing energy is, into telling those kind of deeper, longer, more connecting stories.
Perfect. So we've touched base on your book, your podcast. Before I go into my final question for you, can you just let our audiences know where they can find your book and where they can watch your podcast?
Yeah, so if you are a mum, then my book's the best place to start. It's called Newborn Mothers. And if you are thinking about becoming a professional, then you also might want to listen to the podcast and maybe do my training. Everything's called Newborn Mothers, and it's all at newbornmothers.com. Yeah, so I'm easy to find.
That's great. We'll make sure that we have all of your links available in the show notes below. But closing in, I would like to hear from you. What do you wish more entrepreneurs knew about balancing purpose and profit? Because that's what you're all about. You have a great mission and purpose behind your business. What is your message to entrepreneurs who also would like to go on the same path as yours?
Yeah, that's just, I think, really just sharing the message that you really can do both, and to really intentionally set up your business structure from the beginning so that you can do both. For example, there's been times over the years when I've considered, or people have asked me whether I would think about having shareholders or selling part of my business to other people. And I've never wanted to, because I knew then I would have to possibly compromise on my values, you know, for profit or for what other people cared about. And I really didn't ever want to have to be in that position. But you can be profitable and make a positive difference in the world. And I think we should stop seeing that as a one or the other kind of a thing. I get frustrated too sometimes when people sort of have this assumption that it's okay to make money from things that are like, you know, ruining the environment and bad for mental health, and, you know, like things like AI, social media, mining, all these massively profitable businesses in the world. And then when a woman or a mother steps up and says, I'm ready to earn some money for the good work that I'm doing in the world, and people go, oh, she's so greedy, she's so selfish, how could she charge for that? It should be free. So we as a society need to start going, well, hang on, why aren't we prepared to pay people for things that are good for the world as well?
Yes.
And as business owners, we need to give people the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. That's so right. I love it. I love what you just said there. Is to make sure that even if you're earning, people have to realize that the good, they should be paying for something that is good and not just for something that's ruining everything. But thank you so much, Julia, for sharing all of your wisdom, your mission, your goals, the lessons that we learned here today from you on how you're changing lives of mothers and you're changing lives of aspiring professional doulas in your industry is definitely eye-opening and very inspiring. So for everyone listening here today, you can learn more about Julia and newborn mothers through the links in our episode description. And thank you so much, Julia, again for being here. It was so nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
It
you.
was such a pleasure.
Yes.
And thank you for all your beautiful questions.
Thank you so much. So this is the Business Journal, everyone, powered by Next Level Assist. I'm Mia One here with Julia Jones, and we'll see you on the next episode.